In this video, I'll be installing a replacement helical cutter head in my 6-inch joiner. And it's actually pretty easy. This is my joiner. It is a 6-inch Delta X5, and I bought it almost 20 years ago, back in 2005. Specifically, this is the model 37-866X, but Delta made a whole bunch of joiners that are virtually identical. In fact, the owner's manual that came with my joiner actually lists two different model numbers, neither of which match the one on my joiner, even though, I bought it new, so I know I've got the right manual. As well, many other companies make 6-inch joiners that they're going to look a lot the same because a lot of them are made in the same factories overseas. There's only a few factories overseas in Asia that make most of the joiners. This one happens to come from China. The motor works fine, the base is solid, the tables are cast iron, perfectly flat. The fence is great, the guard is great, and I just replaced the switch a couple of years ago, so this thing should be good for another 20 years. However, I hate the cutter head. This is the original cutter head, which has 3 straight blades in it. I just find that setting and adjusting the blades on this is a huge pain in the neck, and that means that I just don't do it as often as I should. The blades that are on there now, they're probably on the dull side, and in fact they're nicked, and they've been nicked almost since the day I put them in, but because it's such a pain in the neck, I've just been living with it. I will move the fence over to avoid the nick if I can, and if I can't, I just have to live with it and then sand it or plane it out later. So I'm going to replace it. This is the Lux Cut III Helical cutter head. It arrives with this thick cardboard cover to take out a whole bunch of screws to get at it. It's mounted in these wooden blocks, so it's not actually even touching the sides of the box, so I think it should be just good. Comes with some spare blades as well as some Torx heads for adjusting them. I'm not going to take this plastic wrap off just yet. There are 4 rows of cutters, 28 in total. They're on an angle, so they do a shearing cut. In fact, if you look closely at one of the blades, there's a bit of a curve to the blade even. This Lux Cut head was provided to me by the folks at mywoodcutters.com, but they don't have any editorial control over my video. This is still all going to be my own thoughts and words. And in fact, because I'm located in Canada, I'm still going to be responsible for the duty and taxes and brokerage fees, and I haven't got those bills yet. I hope they're not too much. But they carry the Helix head as well as the Lux Cut. The link to their website is in the video description below. So just as a recap, we got some Torx drivers, we got some spare blades, some spare screws, and the actual head, and 1 piece of paper. Notice what's missing. There's no actual included instructions. Fortunately, I've got most of the instructions right here because, as I said before, I bought this new, so I've got the owner's manual, and the owner's manual has assembly instructions for at least the stock unit, so I will just follow that in reverse and we'll get that most of the way there. Assuming you have the same joiner as me, these are the tools that you're going to need. You're going to need a set of Allen keys or hex keys, specifically a 2.5mm, a 3mm, a 6mm, and an 8mm. As well, you're going to need a 17mm wrench, standard screwdriver, and if you have one, a gear puller, or you can maybe get away with using a pry bar and some wood to knock the bearing mounting blocks loose, and then you'll want something like a piece of pipe and a blunt hammer for when you reseat them, and some tape also for wrapping the head. First, make sure it's unplugged. The guard comes off with the 2.5mm hex key. Don't lose it. Use a 6mm hex key to loosen the fence. It's fairly heavy, so be careful. Oh my. Quick cleanup. 2 more 6-inch hex bolts on either side of the fence support. Those also need to be removed. And remove that. And now a 3mm hex key for the pulley on the head here. And I'll try a little persuasion. Oh, there's another one. Almost. And don't forget this little key. Don't want to lose this. There we go. Pulley and the key. We need to loosen these next, and there's a bolt that goes down here, and for that I'm using a 17mm wrench, and I forgot to push record, so I missed the first little bit, but it's actually not that tight, but it is kind of interfering with the There's a dust chute on the inside that's hitting the, there we go. Oh, it is a nut. That's unexpected. Don't want to lose that. Okay, first bump in the road. From what I've seen online, these should be bolts that you loosen and then they drop down out of these blocks. In my case, there was a nut that dropped down, so the bolt is still in the block. Now, there is a slot in the end, so I think I should be able to loosen it, but to do that, I'm going to have to move the jointer. So I have to do a little bit more than I was expecting. So I'm going to take off the power switch, I have to take off the dust hood, and there's 3 bolts underneath here that will then loosen the jointer, so I should be able to maneuver it so that I can get that out of there. And I just need to remove this just so that I have room to swing it around and reposition it. The power switch has actual nuts on the back, so don't lose those. Now I need to pick up my microphone, which fell down my shirt. Now we'll just lay this down out of the way. Get the dust chute out of the way, and again, put the screws back in so you don't lose them. There's 1 mounting bolt up the dust chute, and there's 2 mounting bolts at this end that you have to get at from inside the cabinet. It's a bit awkward, but it's an 8mm. Okay, that's 1, 2, and 3. And in case you hadn't figured it out yet, we are no longer following the manual because, you know, the manual doesn't talk about removing and replacing the head, so we're kind of into uncharted territory. I'm going based on some other videos and documents I found online and just looking at it and figuring it out. You know, let's take out a couple of bolts and put it back together. Now I'm going to carefully lay it on its side. And now I can get at this. Oh, and it just turns out so easily. That's 1. Other one. Oh, and I just felt the head loose slide. So I got 1 hand holding on it so it doesn't tip. Now I'm going to now we can just slide the head out, and I hope I'm on camera because I don't want to do that again. Oh, there's the old one and there's the new one, and they look the same size. Now I just got to get these 2 mounting blocks off, and I don't have a gear puller. Before I rush out and buy one, let me first just try just wedging it off. I heard it's not that difficult. I'm tapping at this one, but this one is also coming out. That's funny. There we go. Don't drop it like I did. So that worked, but if you have a gear puller available, you might want to use that. One thing I saw online, and I just verified with mine, is these are not the same size. They're not identical, so make sure you keep straight which one goes on the pulley side and which one goes on the other side. This can get put away now, hopefully never to be used again. Okay, I need to get this mounted onto here, so I need to get this plastic off because it's blocking the bearings. And oh, by the way, yes, the Lux Cut is very nice in that it has bearings already installed. Not all of them do that, but the bearings are also covered in the plastic, so there it is. Of course, I'm immediately going to put some tape on it because I don't want to cut myself. Okay, I got smart and I put it back into the shipping box. And the mounting blocks need to slip into the bearings. It just sort of slides right in nicely. And the other side might need a tappy tap. I don't have a nice big socket, but I have a little bit of ABS, so let's try that. There we go. Now the fun begins, putting it back together, fingers crossed. And we will slide this in, bolt back up inside there. And while I'm at it, I'll get this nut started First the lock washer. And then repeat that on the other side. Then I need to get it lined back up with these mounting holes. Get the bolts back installed, which is going to be a little tricky. Be easier with a couple of people. There we go. Oh, I think I got one. And the other one, I'm on a roll here. This is going to be the fun one though, because I'm going right up the dust chute with it, but hopefully the other two screws have forced it into alignment. And the power switch can go back also. And I might as well take the opportunity to do this is the equivalent of a screen peel. Oh, can I get it in one piece? All right. Put the key in place and the pulley needs to be in place. Oh, that just pops right in. Get the belt on before. Just lining up the belt. I'm looking down. That looks pretty good. Click. Now the fence support, it's got some alignment pins which help with getting everything into the right place. Now the fence, which I should have carried from the other side. Oh, that's heavy. You only need an Allen key, but if you can get one of these mounted into a drill, that might make this a little bit easier. And the guard is the last thing, but to crank the spring a few times and then okay, and then put the Allen key back in. I think that's it. So now I know I'm probably going to have to do some tuning, but let's see. Sounds almost the same. First time. Definitely needs to be adjusted because this is too high and I can't feed the boards. So the outfeed table needs to be exactly level with the top of the blades. And it seems that my outfeed table needs to come down a little bit. So over on the side I have a lock here that I can loosen up. And then under here I have a knob that I can use to adjust the height of the outfeed table, and I'll do that along with the straight edge. I haven't adjusted this knob in like 20 years, so I think it's a bit on the stiff side. So my owner's manual let me down because it told me I only needed to loosen this one, but I needed to loosen both of these bolts as well, 3mm hex key, and then the knob adjusted it quite easily. It took me about 5 minutes of fiddling to get it into position. Wait, I lied. After I ran several test boards, I noticed that I was getting some pretty nasty snipe on the trailing end of the boards each time, so the outfeed table still was not set right, so I need to, spend some time fiddling and playing to get it tuned in just right. And here I can see that sure enough, there's a gap there. Here, that's one board. Here's another one. Also a bit of a gap. And a third one. Yeah, you can see the gap. This table needs to come up just a bit until there is no gap. I followed the manual the first time to set it, and by refining that, I'm sure I would eventually have gotten it, but I checked online and I found this neat tip video from John from Lincoln Street Woodworks that I think will help me get this quicker. What I've done is I've set the infeed table fairly deep, and I took a number of boards and I did just a couple of inches cut here at the beginning, and I will use that as markers. And now I've got it unplugged and I've got the guard off, and we will use that to set the height. Oh, that's going down. Let's give it a crank and get it up a bit. Okay, now it looks like there's no gap. Let me... Pretty. And now I need to lock it down and we'll do some more tests. So no, I wouldn't recommend you copying me. I left the guard off just because I didn't want to have to keep putting the guard off and on, but I was very careful in using push blocks. Disclaimer aside, I think I've got it. So I've run a bunch of test boards and they're looking pretty good. I marked them all so I wouldn't forget later. Front, I fed in the front and then I slide along and there's the end and there is no visible and no tactile snipe. So maybe not perfect the first time, but I think I got it the second time. And even if I end up finding later that I still need to tweak it again, while it can be a bit annoying, it's really not that hard. You know, loosen those nuts, put a board on it and do some adjusting, and it took me maybe 10-15 minutes at the most. So onward. I'm not sure if you were tracking my shirt changes, but this whole process was pretty quick. I did the actual installation in one evening, and again, that's also with filming, so that's reading the manual, taking it apart, getting the old head out, putting the new head in. Yeah, that was one evening, like say 2.5 hours. So the actual upgrade is pretty quick. So let's move on to some testing now. So before the upgrade, I prepared a number of pieces of wood for testing. I have a piece of ash, I have a piece of spruce construction lumber. I think it's out of a 2x8. I have some black cherry. I have some maple and a piece of walnut. Now, other than the spruce, these are all good hardwoods, and you know, there's a few knots here and there, but unfortunately, I don't have any like highly figured wood like a bird's eye maple or like a crotch grain. Unfortunately, I just don't happen to have any. I don't normally work with that stuff, and I wasn't willing to go out and spend a bunch of money buying some just to turn it into sawdust. But this is the lumber that I work with, and so this is what I have to test. So in addition to the test samples, I also have a decibel meter on my phone, which I've got positioned about 1 meter from the cutter head. And just for fun, I also have a kilowatt meter plugged in so that I can measure the wattage. Why not? So I took each piece and I ran it through the joiner several times before I changed the blades, and then again several times after I changed the blades, getting a feel for it, how it was performing. I wasn't really that worried about noise because I'm going to wear hearing protection anyways, but it was interesting for noise, the idle speed. So if you just have it on, I'm getting like say 73 decibels is what my little meter is. You know, I haven't calibrated or anything, so it's just whatever that app is showing. But with the dust collector, you know, I'm getting more like, you know, 80 decibels, and that's before I made the change or after. But what was interesting is during the cutting, on the straight blade, I'm getting up into the mid-90s, whereas with the helical head, it only peaked at about 90 or 91 decibels. So it's actually a little bit quieter, which is interesting. Wattage goes the other direction. With the straight blades, you know, at idle, 350 to 400 watts. The same on the helical head at idle, like when the motor's just running, but no load is placed on it. Putting on a load, but I'm getting, you know, somewhere between 11 to 1300, 1400 watts. And the same with the helical head, I'm getting 13 to 1400. However, it will sometimes peak at in the 1500s. And once I happened to glance over and it flashed to 2000 watt, which totally shocked me. But I couldn't really tell that I was pushing it at any different speed or anything, or that the wood was any more gnarly or whatever. These were all about 5-inch wide boards, so they're all doing a pretty heavy, wide face cut when I was doing that. So the all-important finish, which of course is not easy to convey on screen because so much of it is tactile, and I already admitted that my old blades were probably on the dull side, but the big deal for me will be the nicks. Here's all my test boards, and they're all with the before finish up, and I will try to get this on screen, but there are so many nicks along this old piece. There's a line going here and here. Let me try on the cherry. I think it's more visible on the cherry. You can see the line there and the line there. There's a line there. Here I can feel it. It's not so easy to see, but it's just a line of roughness because there's nicks in the blade, which means there's slightly raised sections in the wood. Here's the ash. Again, Nick, 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 nick. And I know somebody can just say, well, you were lazy. You should have learned how to adjust your joiner blades properly and how to sharpen them properly. And I don't care. I don't want to. And with this, I don't have to. If I get a nick in this, loosen the nicked one, turn it 90 degrees, tighten it back down. Make sure you've cleaned the bed where the blade sits in so you don't get sawdust under it, and off you go. And now I flip the boards over, so these are all the after sides. These were all cut on the new helical head, and it's interesting to compare. The maple is like glass, glassy smooth. The cherry, it's a little bit different texture to it. This one had a fair bit of wild grain in it. You can, I mean, the knot, you can feel that where there's cracks in the knot, and here there is a little bit where I can just feel a bit of roughness. The walnut, again, is like glass except for over the knot. I mean, and this is end grain. And there I can feel a little bit of texture, but I'm thinking that's just more of these, there's all these little holes from the grain going in. The spruce actually feels a little fuzzy. It's kind of, I want to make sure, yeah, I do have the right side up. It's definitely smooth, perfectly jointed, but it's just got a slight texture to it. The ash, again, is like the maple, absolutely like glass. So I'm tempted to go out and buy some tiger maple or some bird's eye or something, because I'm really curious to compare that. So we're going to hit pause on this video now for at least a month, maybe 2, and I'm just going to live with this thing. I will put some projects through it, and then I can give again some more thoughts at the end. And full disclosure, that's what the My Woodcutters guys, they asked me to do that. They want me to give a experienced point of view on this upgrade. So pause, and we'll be back in a flash. Today is now May 17. I started this upgrade project back at the end of March, so I've had my upgraded joiner head installed for a little over 6 weeks now, and I've used it on a few projects. And the executive summary is, I love it and I wish I'd done this years ago. First, I love that it's quieter. Now, as I mentioned during the decibel testing, I always wear hearing protection, but even with that on, I can tell that it's quieter. And I'm in a basement shop, so with my family upstairs, noise matters. And secondly, I love the finish that I get. It makes a noticeably nicer surface, especially if you slow down. If I slow down the feed rate, the rate at which I push the wood through the joiner, I can get a glass-like surface. That said, I mean, it is still a joiner. In terms of workflow, I'm usually going to take the board from the joiner to the table saw or some other cutting operation. In other words, you're still going to need to sand your projects. Sorry. And of course, if I do get a nick in one of the 28 blades, I love that I can just loosen it, turn it 90 degrees, tighten it back down, and be on my way. Also, bear in mind that carbide knives tend to last on average 10 times longer than steel knives. What that means to me is that the problem of nicked blades causing grooves in my workpiece is essentially gone forever. Now, I have heard that these helical heads can actually make the motor on your tool work harder because it's essentially cutting continuously. There's no little breaks in the cutting action, so it's always under load. And I kind of noticed that with the kilowatt meter because it would seem to be spiking a bit more on the electricity usage, but that said, in terms of what I perceive, I can't really tell that it feels any different when I'm pushing the board through. And minor point, but I did really appreciate that the Lux Cut head comes with some bearings already installed on the head, made it that much easier to install in the tool. So do I think the upgrade is a good idea, or should you just buy a new one? I think you know the answer to that because you saw me do the upgrade on this one. And really, I was surprised how manageable it was. I mean, the whole process went quicker and smoother than I had anticipated. So on the whole question of upgrading versus just buying a new joiner, I did find it interesting to compare prices. I checked a number of online tool stores in Canada and a whole bunch in the United States. And for most brands, the price premium of a helical head joiner, so one where it's already installed with a helical head versus a joiner that doesn't have a helical head, well, the price premium is basically equivalent to the price of the upgrade kit. So that's kind of a wash, I think. So put all that together, and in my view, if your jointer is otherwise fine, then I think the upgrade is the way to go. So again, I want to mention mywoodcutters.com. Big thanks to them for helping me with this upgrade. You can find a link to them in the description below. Thanks for stopping by. Hope you learned something. I did.